Hello, John Talley here with Partzilla.com. Today I'm going to show you how to change out the fork seals on our 2007 Suzuki GSX-R1000R. So what's that going to entail? Well, we need to get the front calipers taken off, the front wheel and the front fender, drop the forks out, and then carry them over to the teardown bench. So if you're ready, I'll go grab a couple of tools and we'll get started. All right, don't break out in a cold sweat, guys. This is going to be skill level 2, so it's not going to be that bad. Just need to stay organized and keep things clean. All right, as far as the tools you're going to need, a 10, a 12, 22, and a 24 socket. On the Allen wrench side, 4, 5, 6, the usual suspects. But you also want a 6mm 90 degrees because there's some tight areas that a regular old ratchet is not going to fit. Speaking of ratchets, make sure you have a decent one of those. On the wrench side, just need one 17mm. Beyond that, want to get just a small pry bar, flat blade, Phillips screwdriver, small pick tool, decent pair of needle nose pliers, a breaker bar, and then as always, a decent torque wrench. Now, let's talk about special tools for a moment. These are really going to be required. You're going to need this inner rod holder. Also going to need this outer nylon. It's actually a bushing that's down in there that we're going to have to get a hold of. Beyond that, you need this little retaining plate to hold it in place, and then a seal driver. Now, if you would, reference our exploded diagrams. That lays out all the parts that you're going to need to get this job done. Plus, if you get confused as to what order things need to go back in, it shows you exactly how they're supposed to be reinstalled. So, once you have your tools, your special tools, and then your parts together, we can go over to the machine and I can show you how to do it. Hey guys, if you zoom in here, this is the reason we're going in to do this. Just one of the legs is actually leaking oil, but it wouldn't take long for the other side. So you want to go ahead and do this as a pair. You can see the oil covering the part of the front fender. So yeah, this is the one that's been leaking. All right, let's start by getting the calipers off. The left caliper we can just leave on the bench. But I do want to get a zip tie, and I'm just going to hold up the right side because I don't want it to hang by the hose. It's not a good idea to keep it kinked like that. The front tire is going to need to come off first. The end bolt is a 22, and we're going to loosen up the pinch bolts and then pull the axle out. All right, next, let's go ahead and get the front fender off. It's got 3 Allens on each side. Yuck. We should be able to clean all this back up once we get it pulled apart and get those new seals in there. All right, before we loosen up the clamps and drop the forks out, what I want to do is go ahead and loosen up the fork cap bolts. And it's a 24mm. You don't want to take them all the way out, you just want to loosen them up because once we get them out of the front of this machine, they're going to be a little bit tougher to hold on to. Yeah. I don't think you'd want to try to do that with them sitting in a vise. Chances are they were going to spin and probably end up gouging them. Like I said, just want to break them free. Now, let's go in and loosen up all the clamps. They're all 6mm. You don't have to take them all the way out, just loosen them up. The thumb ones are going to be down at the bottom. All right, see if we can twist her out of there. All right, there it is. Now we just need to do that to the other side. There we are. Now it looks like the bike that Captain Kirk was riding. Hovercraft looking thing. All right, we've got our clamp down. Let's go ahead and readjust the rebound all the way to the softest position. It's right there. All right, now we can go ahead and remove the cap bolt. All right, what we need to do here is grab that collar on either side with this little special tool, push down on the spring, and then we insert this where we can take off that locking nut and remove the cap all the way. So with the Suzuki special tool, you're supposed to hold the spring down and get this in here while you're also holding this into place. Good grief. Well, I ended up putting a ratchet strap over the bottom of the fork, pulling it into position, tightening it down. Then that allowed me to lift up and get this holder in there. Wow. So now let's go ahead and get off that cap bolt. All right, not a whole lot of pressure there, or a whole lot of torque. So now we can take off the cap and put it to the side. The inner rod. Now I need to release this carefully, pull this out, and then the spring and the plastic and the different nylon pieces are all going to come up. All right, take them out in the order that they need to go back in. When you're pulling these out, pay attention to how they're coming out. See how that's tapered from the top to the bottom? I'm going to make sure that goes back to the bottom. All right, now we can go ahead and drain the fluid out of it. There comes some sediment. I knew there had to be something nasty in there eventually. All right, Suzuki wants you to take out the dampening rod, but I'm going to leave it actually in place in the tube and go ahead and remove the outer section, because that's really what I'm after. I'm just going to leave that part in there. All right, now let's put it back in our vise carefully. Don't tighten it down too much. And we'll go ahead and get off that dust seal. Get out our actual oil seal along with that little clip that's holding it in. And the way I'm going to get this out, just this little pry tool, what I'm going to do is just rotate it ever so slightly, and then it'll lift right out. Make sure this goes back in the same direction that it comes out, but what I want to do is finish cleaning it up, as it's got a fair amount of residual just sludge that I want to get out of there. Keep everything just as clean as possible. So I've got all the parts together. So what we have here are the actual seals, those two clips that are going to hold the seals down in place, new O-rings for the end cap, and then a couple of the dust shields. All right, I'm going to get a little bit of fork oil, put it on our slider tube, and then what we're going to do is we're going to put each piece on the actual slider tube, then position it onto the outer fork housing, if you want to call it that, and then we'll drive in the seal, put in the clip, and then press in the dust seal on the outside. So we'll hold that off to the side for a minute. What we need to do is drive in the seal. It's a little nylon seal driver. And you will know if you have it all the way in, because it'll be just below the edge of where this little clip goes. Now we can go ahead and push in our dust boot, and you can just do that with your fingers. Now start getting some fluid in this thing. All right guys, what we're going to do is go ahead and fill it up to this upper level, but we need to thread that onto the damper rod. And we just want to move the push rod in and out several times till we get rid of all the air that's inside the system. So you want to do this about 10 times and then let it sit for about 4 or 5 minutes. And before you set the level, I do want to go ahead and put this rod back in, because that'll affect the overall level. All right, I've got it filled all the way to the top of the outer. What we're going to do is shift it around just a little bit, and that will allow me to move the inner through a couple of strokes. So we're trying to get it to fill in all those voids. Make sure there's no air anywhere. We can come up, we've got it compressed all the way. Now we're just going to snug it in place. Now let that sit, and then we're going to put in our extraction, set it at the right level. We're actually going to set it for a height of 124 millimeters down from the top of the tube. So there's 120, there's 130. That should be the 124. Now we're going to take this over to the tube, pop it in there, and extract out that amount, and that will set the height. That's it. All right, we've got our holder again. We need to reattach it to our damper rod. We want to set this initial level of, as far as the number of threads there, to 11 millimeters. So, got a little caliper, and we want that set to 11 millimeters. 10.99, I think that's close enough. Go ahead and attach this holder rod, and we'll recheck that once we actually get the spring and everything else put back in there. So remember, you want the tapered end going up. Make sure this is clean before you drop it in. Got that one little thin washer right here. Then this upper one. Now, the fun part. What we need to do is compress this back down, get in our holder, and then we'll get the cap put back on. So, let's get this little funky tool back in there. All right, that should be far enough. Let's see if we can now bring it up. All right, now that did get jostled around a little bit, so I want to check that and make sure it's still at 11 millimeters. The next thing I need to do is go and replace this O-ring at the top of the cap here and just put the cap back on. All right, we need to go ahead and torque down this locking nut, and it's actually held to 11 foot-pounds. Not a lot of torque. Now, let's go ahead, lift back up on this, get that plate out of the way, make sure this is turned the right way when it goes down, and then we'll relieve pressure on it slowly so we can get it put back in. Now, get a special tool out of the way. Go ahead and get our fort where we can drop it down. All right, now we just want to get her snugged back down, but we're not going to do the final torque until it's back on the machine. All right, this one is finished. Now we just need to do the same thing to the other fork. And there is number 2. So now all we have to do is put them back on the machine. So let's go. All right, let's get these forks wiggled back up in there. When we took them apart, they were really set up pretty high. From the factory, this should be 10 millimeters. I'm just going to set them both the same, at the same height. We'll set them at 10. And what I'm talking about is the distance in between here and the triple tree, which you'll notice somebody's added, let's call it a decorative piece, and that's going to change the height. So that little trim piece, let's call it 3 millimeters. So let's set this top section to 7, and I'm measuring from the top. Most important thing is that they're just even from one side to another. All right, now what we want to do is go ahead and bring this up. So there's a little section that this little protrusion is going to go into in the bottom of the triple tree. Now, let's go ahead and get this top one clamped down. Then we'll go about tightening the rest of the clamps. There's 2 more 6 millimeter bolts at the very bottom of the triple tree, and they're kind of tricky to get to. The only chance you're going to have is to use a 90 degree, unless you want to take the whole fairing off, which I don't think you want to do, because I don't either. Now let's get our right one in. Now, same thing on this side. Bring it around till that little protrusion comes up and slides into the triple tree at the top. Now we just need to get those 2 down at the bottom and we're good to go. All right, so we've got pretty much everything assembled, but there's just one thing left to do. Let's go ahead and put that torque on our cap bolts. Now the torque setting for this is going to be 16.5 foot-pounds. There it is. Well, all right, guys, that pretty much wraps this one up. Only thing left now is just to get it out of this, this hoist that I've got it set up in. Well, listen, if you need any of the parts that we use to do this, why don't you come find us at Partzilla.com and we can get you taken care of. If you have any questions or comments, just leave them in the section below and I'll do my best to answer them. Until next time, we just want to say thanks for watching.